Hi, welcome to my journey. Just setting out here to, get out of the house. The last couple of days, we had bouts of rain and then bouts of scorching heat. We don't know what's going on around here, right? Even though here it doesn't really get too cold, we've at least gotten a little bit of cold weather. My temperature gauge says it's 75 degrees out and it's 7:30 in the morning, and I feel like going for a little outing, even if it's just for a ride. Hold on. So our society had did, a diabolical entrapment that was designed to fleece, seniors, right? More seniors are talking about it. You can see it on YouTube, right? It wasn't just a job market, but it was also property. This guy did an interview with a lady, and she recorded it and posted it on TikTok, and it filtered down to YouTube, where she was trying to get an equity loan. Well, they called her about an equity loan. I believe she was looking into trying to get an equity loan. And the guy ended up telling her to just die so he wouldn't have to work 2 jobs. See, men have a really bad problem thinking that they can just blame other people for their deficiencies. Okay? They blame women, they blame children, they blame the elderly. They keep thinking that these are all of the obstacles, that are stopping them from getting the money that they want, right? It's very similar, like when it comes to race, right? There were so many white people who felt like, well, if they didn't have all of these minorities in the workplace, there would be more work for them. And even if there wasn't more work, because they really didn't want to do more work, they wanted more money. Okay? They wanted more money. So that's the sad part about, a lot of people, who believe in, capitalism wholeheartedly. Right? They feel like if there was less people working, then they can demand more money. Okay? The supply and demand. Supply and demand is a tool, but it can be misused. Right? Okay. So, but then when they're sitting around here with all of this, population out here who aren't working, dirty, hungry, begging, maybe stealing and doing crime and doing illicit businesses just to stay alive, then they're appalled. Make it make sense to me. Make it make sense to me. Right? So right now, I'm out here at 7:30 a.m. I'm riding amongst these other people who are in rush hour on their way to work. I usually don't like getting out here with them because a lot of them, they are so stressed out with anxiety that they have road rage to the 10th degree. Okay? They really do. And then they expect to get to work and be a pleasant person to work with at work. How do you do that? Right? They have to have to stuff their feelings, while they're in the parking lot walking through the door. They have to stuff those road rage feelings, right? But then let one little thing go wrong. Let anything, upset whatever momentum they thought they was achieving by riding in their car at top speed or as fast as they can, considering, there's traffic. Yeah, I can see the highway is definitely crowded and it's stop and go for sure. We will not be getting on the highway. We spent the last couple of days catching up on our sleep and listening to audiobooks. Oh my God. The 2 audiobooks that I was listening to, one was called Last Scene, and that was, a psychological thriller, and it was based off of, cult knowledge, and of course, the type of diabolical situations that they want to use with their power. And it just seems like, oh my goodness, that's what we're going through, right? So if you want to get an idea of, this spiritual battle that's going on, I suggest that book, right? As far as, what the people who decide to do the occult route, and use, things like brainwashing, emotional manipulation, sex magic, it talks about that. The other book that I was reading was, or listening to, the audiobook, was I'm Too Old for That. I was really thinking that this was going to be, something that was going to, mellow me out. But oh my God. This is about a woman who had encountered a dude, right? A dude that was older than her. They ended up, having sex, and, they had taken the sex into the bathtub, so they was taking the shower in the bathtub, and, he insulted her by saying something like, oh, because you worked in a bank, I thought you were, like in your early 20s, like 21 or 22, right? And she kind of took it as an insult by this man, and she ended up tripping him in the shower, and it caused him to die. Then she covered up the death as an accident. She pretended like she wasn't even there, but she got trapped with a baby. So it was definitely an encounter that she wasn't gonna forget. No way, no how. And so then, I guess because, after she had gotten away with, the first murder as a result of, lashing out, because, somebody, insulted her and she was caught in her emotions, she ended up doing it again, right? But the way that they have made it seem like, it was done in her mind, because it was from her point of view, that it was more self-defense, revenge. That's how they made it sound. They made it sound like she's seen it as self-defense, but in a revengeful type of way. And true enough, there was some, situations where, because of the first murder, she was, being targeted. And, yeah. But anyway, she ended up being, the one that ended up becoming like an assassin grandma. Yeah, she was an assassin grandma, because she would talk about her pain, she would talk about her arthritis, she would talk about, her struggles, how, even being a grandma was a great cover for her. Yeah. So that blew me away, I'm like, okay, just when I was, satisfied, that, men were the problem, right? And typically, yes, men was the problem, because men, first started this, from the backhanded compliment to, a man who was a detective that, was trying to set her up and spy on her, which that's an example of what we would call gangstalking. So that book was more or less about gangstalking and, the things that we do, that, nobody knows about, that there are dirty little secrets. So yeah, I was trying, this is the weird part, I was trying to find, relaxation, get my mind off of, the tragedy of what's going on in the world right now. And instead, I ended up, absorbing about 20 hours of exactly what's going on in the world today, except written in a book that I was listening to. So, I just took it as this is something that I have to open my eyes to, right? I don't have to live it. I just had to open my eyes and ears to, these divergent ways of behavior and thinking that, are practiced by other people. Because, in my world, it would be a magical world of fairies compared to what these types of books was depicting. So I do recommend those audiobooks, or even if you read the hard books, it has like a way of, giving you an understanding, not just of, a typical thriller mystery, but you know, it also gives you, you know, some of the mind frame thoughts that go along with it. You know, like a lot of times, you know, we want to believe that, you know, we understand people and we know their thoughts, you know, or how they think. But, you know, I'm going to tell you how those people think. You know, I would not have thought. You know, I would not think that it would benefit me to stalk somebody and ambush them. It just, you know, to me, that to me is like a coward, right? And so that wouldn't be my thinking, right? Because I'm like, rather than play a coward's game, I will cower out and walk away. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But the first book was Last Seen, and that was about, you know, occult and strategies used to control other people. And the second book was more of a 3D approach, where people actually are not using occult, but they're using technology and then actual physical attacks in the real. You know, so I truly recommend them.